Welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
To me, being perfect is not about that scoreboard out there.
This is a chance of a lifetime.
When you can understand the person, you can then work towards a common goal.
We are all on the same team.
Know your role and do it to the best of your ability.
Focus on the fundamentals. We've gone over time and time again.
Your defense has got to be better.
Leave no doubt tonight.
Great moments are born from great opportunity.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Our great coach on this episode is Anson Dorrance. Anson is an American soccer coach. In the USA, it is referred to as soccer and not football, who is currently the head coach of the women's team at the University of North Carolina. Under his leadership, the team has won 21 of the last 31 NCAA Championships. His teams have a winning record of 91%, and he has been named the NCAA Coach of the Year on 8 occasions. In 1991, he also led the USA team to the first Women's World Cup. The USA have gone on to win the World Cup on 4 occasions, and 1/3 of the players in those teams have come through Anson's team at North Carolina. Another notable alumna of his team is Sarina Weigman, who led the UK team to the Women's Euro Cup in 2022. Anson has firm and challenging philosophies that he has honed over many, many years, and listening to him made me reflect on the way I parent and lead. In this fantastic interview, some of the highlights for me were how coaching men and women the same is a mistake. It is associated learning that women are better at making moral judgments based on how people are affected, and he personally would prefer to be led by someone like that. The concept of the competitive cauldron, which shapes the culture in his team and is based on rankings for performance on a multitude of areas at training and in games. And his fantastic idea that, quote, if you're a female and you're competitive, you are excoriated by your own culture, like there's something wrong with you. No, there's nothing wrong with you, end quote. This was a deep conversation with a coach who has experienced prolonged and sustained success. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. The program bridges the gap between theory and real-world application, bringing together world-leading professors, executives and industry partners to teach you how business can be used for good. I have just started working with the team at Macquarie on some projects and can attest to the quality of the people and material. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy our interview with Anson Dorrance.
You're listening to the Great Coaches Podcast.
Anson Dorrance, good morning my time, good afternoon your time, and welcome to the Great Coaches Podcast.
My pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Well, could we start with something really simple? Could you tell us where you are in the world and what you've been up to so far today?
Right now, I am sitting in the middle of my dining room during a spring break in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And the break is I coach at a university level, so all my players right now are actually scattered to the winds. So I don't have a training session this afternoon. I'm an absolute free man, because if I did have a training session this afternoon, I would not be on this podcast.
Well, thank you very much for carving out a little bit of time to chat with us. I've been, as I said off air, I've been chasing Corey, your assistant, for at least 6 months to get this interview. So I'm very excited to chat with you today.
Well, so am I. So I appreciate this. And by the way, I enjoy all these conversations. So please don't think that this is any sort of labor for me. It's not. In fact, I have rarely turned down a podcast opportunity, because honestly, the conversations with different people are fascinating for me, and and I thoroughly enjoy them. So I like this new medium.
Well, I'll be waiting for the feedback at the end of the interview then to see how I went relative to all the others that you've done. Anson, I would like to just ask you about something I read about you in preparing for today. And you said that early in your career, you identified 5 great coaches and selected the 5 most prominent qualities of each of them to form your own philosophy. Could you tell us who those people were and what eventuated from that exercise?
Yeah, so what I did, I think this is in the intro to Training Soccer Champions. I had all these different mentors, and there was a quality in each mentor that I tried to adopt myself. So there was a guy that was coaching at Lynchburg College by the name of Schellenberger, and he just seemed to exude class. And so I wanted to sort of be able to exude his class. So I adopted his sort of persona in that one area of, I guess, checking boxes. And so I wanted to have the class of Schellenberger. I wanted to have the presence of Bobby Gansler. Gansler was one of these wonderful coaches that came through Europe. I think he was part German, maybe part Austrian. And he was a coaching instructor for me when I was a young coach. And I really loved when he would stand in front of a group, and he had this ability to stand there and just project confidence. And he had a wonderful manner. He was very formal in a very good sort of Germanic way. And I really respected him. And he taught me a lot about the game in these coaching schools that I attended with him. And so that was a part of it for me. I wanted to have the humility of a Dean Smith. I mean, this is the collegiate coach of, Michael Jordan. And so, watching Dean Smith work just was extraordinary, because the way he treated the lowliest manager on his roster would be treated with the same amount of deference and respect that he would treat Michael Jordan with. And I just really, really appreciated all these different qualities that he exuded as just a remarkable leader of people. And then one of my mentors is a wonderful gentleman by the name of Cliff McCraft. And when I was a young coach, I would go to these coaching conventions, and invariably he was one of the keynote speakers, or at least the master of ceremonies. And he had this capacity with his storytelling and his charisma to just own the room. So I wanted to be able to speak like Cliff McCraft. And so basically I took a piece out of all these different coaches, and I tried to assemble in what my mind was going to be, the super coach that could sort of do everything, speak, charismatically lead, with this wonderful sort of Germanic frame jutting out, commanding the training session. And so I just found these great qualities in all these people I admired, and sort of assembled them all together in the intro to the book. And honestly, it was so long since I've written that book, I may have skipped a coach or two or substituted someone in for someone else. But honestly, that was my ambition. I wanted to really be as good as I could be, and not in any one area. I wanted to be very good at everything. And so talk about ambition. I did not lack for ambition as a young man. Now that I'm an older man, I'm wondering where all this came from. I think it came from the love of my mother. She absolutely loved me. She gave me this extraordinary confidence because I run into most people, they don't have this extraordinary confidence that I have. And I know that I benefited from a mother that just, thought I was just a great little kid. And I'm absolutely convinced that she made all the difference in the world for me, because my ambition was absolutely over the moon.
Well, you also attribute your love of soccer to the time you spent living in Kenya. And I'm wondering, what do you remember seeing in Kenya that ignited your affection for soccer?
Actually, it wasn't Kenya. My first soccer experience was actually in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. In Kenya, I was the classic, son of an aristocratic family. And I played sports like rugby and cricket, and I boxed because that's what aristocrats did. I played some field hockey as well. We aristocrats would never, descend into the abyss of the lower classes and play a game like soccer, God forbid. So, no, in Kenya, I went to this English school, and I represented my color, which was mead. It was yellow. And we competed against 3 other colors in all these different events. And soccer was not one of the events. I mean, we even had this event that was called British Bulldogs, where you had to sprint across an open field, not get caught. And if you were caught, the challenge of the person that caught you was to lift you up in the air and scream British Bulldogs and then throw you to the earth, So we even had ridiculous games like that, as the Meade Army would try to cross through, the Red Sea or whatever, however that red team named themselves. So I was wonderfully a British aristocrat in those days. And I was not a soccer player back then, because that wasn't for me. That was for the lower classes. And so I didn't actually pick up soccer until I went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And boy, did I have a baptism of fire with soccer in that environment, because I was clearly the absolute worst player on the field in every game I played in, as these extraordinary African boys would dance around me, over me, through me, like I was a traffic cone. So that was my exposure to the game. And honestly, I did not fall in love with it then. I'm not one of these people that, graciously enjoyed being thumped to death in a sport that I had no mastery of. Back in those days, I was an expert at shooting marbles and throwing rocks. My arm is a gun. And all of us back in the St. Joseph's days in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, all had a rock in our back pocket that we used to throw at basically these cigarette cards that we cut out, that at a relatively long distance had to hit with this rock. And as a result, my throwing arm developed wonderfully during these days. And of course, everyone wanted to beat the white kid with the brand new marbles, because all of their marbles were, destroyed from overuse. And mine, of course, were brand new. Why? Because I was the only white kid in the entire school. In fact, one of my father's favorite jokes about me when I went to this African school was that it's one of the few academic awards I've ever won, actually, in my life. I've only won 2 academic awards in my life. I'm talking about from elementary school right through the end of when I dropped out of law school. And one of them was I won the English award at St. Joseph's School in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Why? Because I was the only kid in school that spoke English at home. So, and the guy that gave me the award, by the way, was Emperor Haile Selassie, which is wonderfully extraordinary, especially when you look at his status in the world as basically ruling the country that was the only non-colonized African country. And as a result, he's revered all over the world as this great African leader, because Ethiopia was never colonized. But so I was introduced to soccer there, but honestly, I was miserable. I did not develop great affection for it, as people went through me like I was dead. My games back then were marbles and throwing rocks.
Well, from that humble beginning, a big career grows. But I want to go on a bit of a journey before we get there, because I've got an interesting quote from you, Anson, actually. You say, your margin of success is based on your inner drive. Now, I'm curious to ask you, what do the best team environments do to allow this inner drive to express itself?
I guess the what's really interesting, the older I get and the more podcasts I join, the more I have a better understanding actually of who I am. And I'm one of these guys that loves listening to political shows, especially now that, the United States is lurching towards authoritarianism. So I watch all these liberal political shows on American television. And I also watch the conservative shows, because I certainly want to know what everyone's thinking and what they're saying. And there's a wonderful American liberal commentator, political commentator by the name of Rachel Maddow. And I love listening to her show. And the reason I do is she's exceptionally bright. And she brings on interesting people to sort of explain the world to me, or at least American politics to me. Now, this particular day, she brought on a wonderful expert, and she was about to introduce these series of questions that this expert was going to address, and then the expert turned it around on her and said, "Well, Rachel, what are you an expert in?" And I saw her literally stopping to think, because she had never been confronted with this kind of question. And this is an extraordinarily articulate and eloquent, loquacious speaker. So it wasn't like she ever had to hesitate before someone asked her a question. And yet when this person asked her, "Well, Rachel, what are you an expert in?" she actually hesitated. And I was thinking, this is extraordinary. So that means she's actually thinking about what to say. And then her answer, I thought, was absolutely wonderful because of what it forced me to do. And she said, "I am an expert in reading comprehension." And I was thinking to myself, that is a really interesting answer. And then I started to think about that answer. And that was a perfect answer for her to give, because when I listened to her on her political show, she is extraordinary explaining the world to me, and the politics in the world, and the different opinions of the politics in this world, and the different issues that I guess all of us have to address if we are interested in the the future of this planet we live on and the people that are in it. And it forced me to think, well, Anson, what are you an expert on? And the last thing that came to mind to me was football, soccer. That didn't occur to me. And then I thought about it, and I came to the conclusion, I'm an expert in competition. And the question you asked me is a really good one, because I think what sets the environments apart that I coach in is I can construct an environment where my athletes are hanging on with the edge of their fingernails because of how competitive I have roped it up to be. And as a result, my athletes develop what I call the gift of fury, which is the capacity to compete like no one else. And we have had some very ordinary teams that have done nothing but won games, not because they were the superior soccer players, the better tacticians, or more gifted, technically or athletically, but the quality that these great teams that won possessed was the capacity to win. So that's my expertise. I am an expert on competition. And I'm not one of these people that genuinely thinks you can actually teach leadership. In fact, even though I do a lot of leadership speaking, I always let the people know that have hired me to speak in some leadership conference that, you know what, please know if someone in the crowd asks me, "Well, Anson, do you think you can teach leadership?" I'm going to still cash your check, but I'm going to say no. Because I've been trying to teach leadership for, every year I've been coaching, and I don't think I've succeeded. I think what I've discovered is, this person can lead and this person can't. And I've put all these people in different positions to see if they could lead. And even though I've been desperate to try to teach something about leadership, I think all that I've really done is I've put them in these positions and they've succeeded. And I've said, good, okay, well done. I don't think I can teach leadership. And I question whether anyone actually can. But the teams that I've had that have been incredibly successful have been incredibly well led. And I think it's because of these extraordinary people that I've recruited or selected to lead the teams. And then I've watched them do it. And trust me, I work myself to death to teach leadership. And here's the way I guess I would convince myself that I can teach leadership. If everyone I teach, or the majority of them, becomes a good leader. But I can't testify to that. I can't testify to you right now that the majority of the people that I've tried to help become good leaders have become good leaders. And I'm even trying something new this year. I'm always willing to share my latest effort to try to teach leadership. So if you want me to dig into that, I could drill into this new idea I have. And
please share it with us. But I do want to come back and ask you about competitiveness. But I'm very happy to hear about your new leadership idea.
Sure. So here we go. Obviously, the first leadership challenge that all of us have is to lead yourself. And what I'm going to share isn't particularly deep, but it's where we all have to begin, because you can't lead anyone else unless you've succeeded in leading yourself, because in order to lead anyone, you have to have at least some modicum of credibility. So the analogy I use with the young leaders is, there's no hope for you to lead us in fitness if you're unfit. So based on what, part of our culture you want to try to lead, you have to have credibility in that area to lead it effectively. So the first thing you have to start with in any sort of leadership quest is to lead yourself. And this is where so many of us fail, actually. Many of us fail because we just don't have the capacity to lead ourselves. Because leading yourself requires all sorts of things that scare all of us to death, like commitment, work ethic, discipline, keeping our promises. I mean, all these things that are just an incredible series of demands, which is why most of us would rather not lead ourselves. We'd rather, drift with the wind and, do what's ever comfortable and, pursue, whatever, lights our fire. And obviously those people rarely end up leaders because they're so undisciplined and they don't understand the incredible challenge that all of us have that do lead, where the first step is to effectively lead yourself. So here's where I am now. When I was a young coach, the American State Department had the audacity to send me down to Argentina on a State Department mission to teach the Argentinians how to play football. Isn't that extraordinary? So I was thinking to myself, gosh, the arrogance of the American State Department to send me down to Argentina, especially now, me sharing this story with you is wonderful because, of course, they're reigning world champions on the men's side. So anyway, this story is wonderfully appropriate for the current conditions. So anyway, I'm sent down there. No, obviously, I'm not sent down there to, coach men. I'm down there to coach women's coaches and women. So I don't want to pretend that I was sent down there to, reconstruct, the Argentinian men's side. And that's why they've won the world championship, God forbid. So anyway, I'm down there, and the training center back when I was sent to Argentina was right next to the Buenos Aires airport. So, of course, since I'm down there to teach them how to play football, I'm taken into this wonderful training center. I walk in, and what do I see immediately on the walls are pictures of Menotti, the great Argentinian coach that won their world championship back in the day. And they had all these sayings on the walls, and I love sayings. I'm a closet intellectual, so I'm reading one quote after another. And my favorite quote on the wall, and I might not get this exactly right, so God forbid if you're listening to this podcast in the middle of the Buenos Aires, National Training Center, I might not get this exactly right, but I know I'm going to get the theme right. He says something to the effect of, soccer is a collection of small societies. And I was thinking to myself, that is a wonderful description of tactical alliances that occur all over the field. If you're going to if you desire to have an effective team, and obviously a part of it are attacking relationships. If you're playing a 1-3-5-2 with your 2 9s, it's your defensive relationships, between your left midfielder in the 5 and your left back in the 3. It's how close your 6 plays on top of the 3. And so it was a wonderful statement. All of a sudden, when I'm reading this on the walls of, this National Training Center in Buenos Aires, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this guy has something. So one of my many leadership jaunts was, in the last couple of years, I've been talking about small societies more and more. And I even have my teams as they walk out in the field. If we're playing, let's say a 4-3-3, basically my left center back, my left back, and my left wing all walk out into the middle of the field, arms around each other in a line with the tallest player in the middle and the two shorter ones on either arm, and they're walking out. And you're seeing the heads move back and forth as they're chatting. My right center back, my right back, and my right wing are also walking out in a small society. The center of my field is another small society. So basically, my 6 and my 10s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and my 9 or something. So anyway, I've got all these small societies, and they're connecting with each other because they need relationships offensively, but they also need defensively. And so I'm thinking this is just a great move forward. Well, obviously we've added all these different things. And by the way, I have 100 other things I've done. But now the latest thing I'm on is I'm taking our core values, and I'm taking my top 6 finishers in my core values. And these are all done with a peer evaluation to sort out who lives my culture. And I'm picking my bottom 6 athletes in my core values, and I'm matching up my best liver of my culture with my worst. I'm giving them sections of a book written by Christine Porath to read about basically what I'm going to call your personal narrative, basically your self-awareness. And I'm also giving the leaders, the mentors, a book about radical candor to read so they can develop this leadership quality to try to inspire the ones that are not living the culture. And so now I'm matching my core values sort of winners against the ones that haven't lived it yet. And so this is my latest leadership adventure. If you call me in a year, I will let you know if I absolutely fell on my face again for the 400th time or whether there was some progress. And by the way, if there is progress, it's going to appear in a book that Christine Porath and I are going to write together on culture. So that's my latest shot at, trying to develop leadership.
Oh, thank you for sharing it. I'll definitely check out the book, and I will come back in a year and see how you went. But Anson, I would like to go back to competitiveness that you claimed to be an expert in, because in preparing for today, I didn't know a lot about Dean Smith. Growing up in Australia, it just wasn't on the radar as much. But I understand the influence that he had on you as a coach, and the idea of, if I'm getting this right, the idea of measuring performance at training as a way of improving the individual was something that you took from him. And you have this criteria that can go all the way up to 20, which ranks each individual on through a training session, which is absolutely fantastic. So, but what actually I wanted to ask you about is, how do new people that join your team, players, staff, anybody, how do they adjust to this heightened level of competitiveness? How do you help them through that process?
Well, first of all, anyone that joins us knows about the competitive cauldron. They've either read about it in my books or they've been warned against it by all my competitors that basically share with them the last place you want to go is to the University of North Carolina, because everything you do in practice is going to be recorded, and it's basically oppressive, and it's just no fun. So every player coming in knows about the cauldron, and so it's not like they're shocked when they experience it for the first time. They know this is coming. But what's coming, I think, is more benign than they're led to believe, certainly by the competitors that are trying to convince them not to come. Because all we're doing really is we're giving them extraordinary feedback after every single session. And then they have to decide on what they're going to do with this feedback. And I wanted to design a program that I would like to play in. So I hate rules. We don't have any rules. But I also want to know at the end of every single training session, I was the best one on the field. And so I'm an alpha, and I want to declare that the people I recruit are also alphas that just are dying to express themselves. One of my favorite lines in Mia Hamm's book, Go for Goal, was when she said, when I got to North Carolina, I could finally be the athlete I was. And what sort of athlete was she? She was a shark with blood in the water. And in almost every other culture she had been in, she was excoriated for being herself. And when she got to North Carolina, it was like, oh my gosh, I am home. So what we try to tell all these alpha females out there that have been ostracized and sort of shunned and, sort of disgraced in every team they've ever played on because they tried hard and tried to win, your home is waiting for you at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, because we love those kinds of athletes. We will wrap our arms around you and protect you from the chaos of the universe. We will protect you from a culture that has told you there's something wrong with you because you're competitive. And what's wrong with this picture? If you're a male and you're competitive, you're put on a pedestal. And if you're a female and you're competitive, you are excoriated by your own culture like there's something wrong with you. No, there's nothing wrong with you. And so these sort of athletes that come in here that have that sort of disposition, they finally realize they are home. So trust me, the kids coming in, most of them have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. But I think the positive side of all this is I've had the incredible privilege this semester of being asked to co-teach in a course titled The Art and Science of Expertise. And we have two absolutely brilliant UNC professors that I've joined that are teaching this course. And one of the wonderful things we're teaching actually is deliberate practice, the Anders Ericsson idea of how you can become extraordinary by practicing the right way. And there's sort of a formula to it. You set a goal and then you sort of get after it, and then with maximum repetition. But another piece in there that most people don't appreciate is the feedback. The feedback is also critical for successful deliberate practice. And the feedback we give our kids is extraordinary. And this is one of the things I stole from Dean Smith. When I was a young coach, he was just such a wonderful man, and I didn't know anything about anything. And all of a sudden, this coach of Michael Jordan comes up to me and says, Anson, if you like, I'd certainly love it if you and your staff came in. And if you want to watch some practice, we'll set it up for you. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? So, of course, I jumped on his offer. And I went to one of his practices. And first of all, right out of the bat, I was completely stunned. Back in those days, when Dean Smith invited me in to watch him train his basketball team, I was coaching two teams. And so when I prepared for a practice, I sort of had a general idea of what the men were going to do that day. It was going to be, heavy, medium, light, or light. So I sort of had a general idea of what the practice tempo was going to be like. And women, the same thing. And all of a sudden, I come into this Dean Smith practice, and I'm handed like an agenda. Are you kidding me? So basically, to the minute, Dean Smith has written down to the minute what's going on in his practice. I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And so I'm looking down, and sure enough, every, 2.5 minutes or however long, whatever that session was, a noise would go off, and you'd see the players go from one section of the gym to the other. And there was even a noise before they went to a water break, and they're all jogging off for water. The noise would erupt itself again, and they'd have to run back to a different station. And then I'm also noticing underneath every single basket in the gym is a very formal looking manager with a clipboard and a pen, and he's recording stuff underneath that basket. And I'm looking at all the different baskets. Yeah, if it's a 3-point shooting exercise, actually back then, I don't think there was 3-point shooting. So if it was a 2v2 with the bigs underneath the basket, points were scored and recorded. If a guy boxed out for the rebound or failed to, that would be recorded. If it was a free throw shooting event, that was recorded. If it was shooting in general, that was recorded. If it was a 3v3, 4v4, or 5v5, the results were recorded. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely amazing. I'm seeing all this data being collected. And then all of a sudden, the practice is over, and I'm looking down at my sheet, and sure enough, on the sheet, I can see that he has followed everything to the minute. So this guy, in my opinion, was an organizational genius. And then all of a sudden, he calls the boys together at the end, and he's chatting with them a bit. And while he's calling the boys together, I'm seeing all the assistant managers sprint, and I'm not exaggerating, sprint to the scorer's table. Sitting at the scorer's table was the head manager, and you would see him grab one, clipboard and then another, and you would see him, with a calculator, I guess, assembling that day's practice data. And then by the time Dean Smith had finished addressing the troops, you'd see Dean turn around. By this juncture, the head manager would hand Dean Smith a practice ranking. Basically, the first 5 guys would get to leave the shower immediately because through their algorithm, the top 5 guys had the privilege of leaving practice basically before everyone else was doing sprints. The next 5 were lined up on the end of the court, foul line and back, mid-court and back, other foul line and back, other end of the court and back. And then the last 5 guys, I assume, are doing sprints until the end of recorded time. And I was thinking, this is extraordinary. And this is basically deliberate practice, Anders Ericsson stuff on steroids, because the feedback was immediate, but it was also ranked. And I was thinking, you know what? That's the way I'd like to go. I'd like to go to that kind of practice. I would like for all of my peers to acknowledge that this alpha was, again, the most dominant force in practice, because that's just the way I'm built. And we took Dean's stuff, we soccerized it, and we took it to a completely different level. And they get feedback. And now we're at a completely different level, even from the Dean Smith days. Because now I have 7 analytics people, an analytics team, who are all studying statistics at the University of North Carolina. So these are people that are used to numbers, and they're taking a practice and they're turning it into numbers. And so even though we have pre-designed, one-on-one ladders and heading ladders and shooting exercises and, you name it, we've got everything under the sun. Of course, the kids come in, they've got a beep test. They've got a 30-meter dash for acceleration and speed. They've got agility testing. I mean, we test them every conceivable way. I know everything about my athletes by the end of that season, including where they rank in the Cauldron. But what they're getting now, which is even more advanced, is my analytics team is sending them results from that day's practice in minute detail. How many times they gave the ball away, how many times they won it, how many key passes they made, how many times they shot, and what percentage of their shots hit the frame, how many of the shots were across the frame, which is where most good shots should go, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the detail they're getting at night, because it takes them in about 2 or 3 hours to assemble this. And by the way, the university gives them 6 hours credit. So they've looked at our data collections, and my analytics stuff is so detailed. The data analytics department at the University of North Carolina gives them 6 hours credit. So there is a long waiting list for these statistics people to join my program. And so we're in this luxurious position of selecting the best of the best. So we will actually ask the data analytics department, well, who's your best student? And they'll say, it's John Doe. And we'll look at us. Yeah, well, John Doe has applied. Yep, we're going to embrace him. So these people that are working for us now that are turning basically soccer performance into data, and that's just part of the data. So basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive performance with posting the data. Because if you're an alpha, you're not going to want to see your name low on a list. In fact, one of my favorite moments of all time, we brought in this sweet, sweet kid from Dallas, Texas, by the name of Carla Overbeck. And in my opinion, she was one of the best players in the country, but she was just exceptionally kind and thoughtful and sweet. And we brought her in, and it was one of those years where she had to play. We lost the whole defense. She was a center back. So we didn't have a choice. We had to throw her out there on the field. And it was terrifying for her, because she was telling me, obviously, 3 or 4 years after she graduated, she hated starting in her freshman year. She hated the pressure of having to win games for a team that had been winning national championships. And she hated the Cauldron and the fact that every single day in practice, she was asked to beat all of her teammates to death. She just wanted to, hug them all and get along with all of them. And so this was so far out of her comfort zone. And then all of a sudden we're posting this stuff on a regular basis. And all of a sudden I'm seeing her change a bit. In her freshman year, we have 5 different one-on-one ladders. Her freshman year, she didn't win one game in any of the 5 ladders. Her senior year, she didn't lose a game in any of the 5 ladders. I read this interview she gave to the Daily Tar Heel, which is our student newspaper. And she said when they asked her about this transformation she had made as a player, she just came out and bluntly told them, I was sick and tired of seeing my name at the bottom of a list. So this gave her permission to compete, because the way she had been raised all of her life was to not compete. So now there's this coach and a value system and structure that was driving her to compete, and it did. And she became one of the greatest leaders I've ever coached and one of the greatest players for the United States in the history of the United States soccer. She was one of our best players in 1991 when we won the World Championship for the first time. She was the captain on additional gold medal teams and World Championship teams. And but I love that. I'll never forget that interview she gave.
Well, you said something really interesting there, Anson. I'd like to delve into a little bit. You talked about values. Now, you've described this amazing philosophy at your school. And I say it's amazing because it's been tested and tried, and it's produced results, and it's produced great leaders and great people that have gone off into society and done wonderful things. And you've described this philosophy, I think I read somewhere, as steel sharpens steel. But at the same time, caring and gratitude are part of your team's core values. And I'm really intrigued. How do you balance these potentially contrasting ideas, particularly with young people who are impressionable and are at a time in their life when great change is going on around them?
First of all, absolutely wonderful question. I guess I have to share the only other academic award I've ever won. Yeah, the English award in an African school. Well done, Anson. Absolutely brilliant. And the only other academic award I won the religion award at La Ville Saint-Jean, a boys' boarding school in Freiburg, Switzerland. And why did I win the religion award? Because I was insufferable in debating all the priests and brothers and nuns at this boarding school for all the policies in our church that I thought were absolutely ludicrous. So as a result, talk about steel sharpening steel, the people I was debating were seminarians going to the University of Freiburg. These were some of the brightest minds in Catholicism that were teaching in this boys' boarding school. And I decided to fence with them cerebrally, as if my tiny little undeveloped brain would have a chance against any of them. But since I shared with you earlier that confidence has never been a personal problem for me, thanks to, I think, a loving mother, I went after all of them. And at the end of the 4 years at Saint-Jean, they actually recruited me for the priesthood, which was very flattering. I wasn't interested, but I was certainly flattered that they would recruit me. So for me, ethics, morality, these are very, very important topics for me. In fact, my undergraduate degree is in philosophy, and then by accident, I picked up an English degree only because I took reading lists as courses, and that ended up an English degree. I had no intention to be an English degree holder, but the courses I took just gave me an English degree because of book lists of books I wanted to read. But in philosophy, I'm very, very serious about choices that we all have to make. And here's what's interesting about where we are right now, where basically the world is. We're becoming a more and more secular culture. So one of the things I knew we had to establish, if we were going to have the right kind of culture, is we had to figure out a set of principles to live by. And since we are becoming a more and more secular culture, so the days of my Catholic boys' boarding school, I wasn't within a structure at UNC where I was going to mass on every Sunday, and none of my kids that I had recruited or I was coaching had that privilege either, to basically be around, people that can spiritually guide you to make the correct choices. And of course, I was at the nexus of the final escape from obedience. So a kid finishes his or her senior year of high school, where basically they have to genuflect to the higher moral authority in the home, which is the mother and the father. And they're there, and their structure is to genuflect to that authority with obedience, for the first time in their lives, they don't have to be obedient anymore. And I don't expect them to be. So now I have an opportunity to teach them principles. And so here's what people are shocked by when we sort of dig into this. My moral imperative is human development, not soccer development. So the top award at our athletic banquet is not the MVP. It's the Kelly Muldoon Award for character. And so I want these young women I'm coaching now to develop a principle center. They don't come with a built-in principle center because if you've been living a life of obedience, your center is not a principle center. It's basically a structured sort of lack of choice. I guess some would call it form of authoritarianism, where you are learning a sort of way to make choices by being obedient. But in my opinion, that doesn't really structure principle-centered living with the right tool. And so we have our kids basically memorize and try to live 13 principles. And even though you can look at them and say, well, these are basically secular principles, in a way they're not. Because almost every secular principle that I select, if you were a real biblical scholar or even a Jewish scholar or even a Muslim scholar, you could find something within your religious works that would sort of check that box of the different things I'm having my kids sort of memorize. But then the challenge for them isn't just to memorize these quotations, but it's then to live them, because twice a year their teammates are evaluating them against these principles. And then, of course, I get to see everyone's grades, but we will share with everyone the top 4 on the team. And then we would hope that all of them have a sort of a peer evaluation, principle-centered evaluation that's over our standard system, which is basically we do it on a 4-point scale, the way their academics are graded. So there's no confusion. And we want all of our kids academically to live above a 3.0. And we want them to have a principle center of having their peer evaluation of over a 3.0 as well. So that is a very important central tenet of, I guess, my coaching philosophy.
Anson, it's a powerful answer, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. I finding that balance, particularly as a father of 2 daughters, is a challenging one. That balance between competitiveness and these very real and human qualities is very important. But could I ask a question about your own family? Because I was preparing for this interview at a time when we were considering a major change in our family, where we were going to live, in which country. And you had this idea, which I was reading when we were working through it, and you said the key challenge for any athlete is to find a way to elevate their environment. I really love this idea of always elevating your environment. And if it's not too personal, I was wondering how you've helped your own children implement this idea.
For me, well, actually, we're even teaching this in the course. There's seed and soil. So basically, the seed is basically what your potential is. And I think all of us have extraordinary potential if we can find the right soil, if we can find the right mentors, if we can find the right environments to sort of grow in. And so this is our challenge. And it's sort of interesting that you're asking me this question because I've seen, so many bad sides of athletics. I never really forced my kids into sports. Now, they all ended up playing sports. And I think a part of it was because I was a coach. But one thing I really enjoyed about watching my kids grow up the influence of my wife. My wife is a former professional dancer. She danced for Elliott Feld. If you Googled him, he's one of the top American choreographers back in the day. And she danced for the National Ballet Company and Elliott Feld's American Ballet Company. And when we got married pretty young. And so she had to sort of put her ballet career on hold. But she ended up teaching. So she came down here and she started teaching, and she started her own dance studio. So all of my kids were brought up, playing soccer, but also dancing. And my eldest daughter had an extraordinary ambition to be really good in a dance form that my wife had in her school. And my wife sorted out that Michelle wasn't going to be a ballet dancer because the shape of her feet just weren't conducive for that sort of dance form at the highest level. But she had a brilliant tap teacher that was one of the partners with my wife in my wife's dance studio. And she became absolutely extraordinary. And actually, one of my God take me now moments was last December. My eldest daughter, who's got her own dance company, she's got a wonderful name for it. She called it Dorrance Dance. How about that? And my son, when he was 15, I asked him what he was going to do with his life. And he said, Dad, I think I want to write music. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, that's interesting. And then I had a follow-up question. I said, well, why do you think you'll be able to, write music? And his answer was really interesting. And I never forgot his answer. He said, I think I can be a really good composer because I have good taste. And I didn't know what that meant until in December, I'm in New York at the Joyce, and my eldest daughter has 3 world premieres. And in the middle of the 3 world premieres was a performance that she danced in and choreographed that my son wrote the music for. And I am in the theater and I am praying, God, take me now. My life is never going to get any better than this, because my daughter's choreography for the piece was absolutely brilliant. Her dancing was absolutely brilliant. And my son's music was extraordinarily perfect. I can see my son. He's sitting 6 rows down from me on the left, and I'm texting him at the end of his piece. And I basically said, Donovan, that was absolutely unbelievable. And then all of a sudden through the night, because he's texting me back at 3 a.m., we're texting back and forth. We're in New York. And he's explaining to me this, because I have good taste, which is why I'm going to be able to write good music. Because here's what happens if you have good taste and you're a composer. And keep in mind, he's 31, and he told me this at 15. And who knows how many songs he had to burn or throw away. But he's been writing music since he was 15. And at the age of 31, he developed a piece that my other child liked, my daughter liked, and I'm listening to it. And you can imagine the incredible strength it took to basically burn all the other pieces of music that didn't get up to his standard, to be able to produce that piece that my daughter liked, that she performed at one of the major theaters in New York City. And so I think the thing that has really helped our family is, with me being a coach of elite athletes and my wife being a teacher of basically elite dancers, we didn't have our kids suffer through the compromising flattery of the self-esteem movement. So I think a lot of what's happening today with so many of our millennials and our Gen Zs is they were brought up when the common, sociological and psychological parenting books were telling us that our kids need to have extraordinarily positive self-esteem. And so what ended up happening is that sort of backfired on that generation of kids, because basically they were praised for anything under the illusion that, by praising someone for, I guess, substandard, performance was a good thing because you would end up with good self-esteem. What ended up happening with an entire generation of young men and young women is they had no sense of standards. They also have no resilience because everything they've done apparently is extraordinary to build self-esteem. So here they are, they're growing up, no standards, no resilience as a result, no failures. And one of the best teachers I've ever had is failure. And I think one thing we did for our kids is we weren't subject to the self-esteem craze. And I can remember sitting when my eldest daughter was winning a Bessie in New York. And my wife and I turned to each other and we said, maybe she is pretty good. And so, yeah, we have standards. And the thing I absolutely love about my son, my body's a wreck. It's falling apart. So all I do now is I play pickleball. It's the only thing I can do where I can get some exercise and, not have a heart attack or, fall over from, all of my various rugby injuries, by the way. And what I love about playing in this public park is the different people that come up to me and tell me what a wonderful man my son is. And I really appreciate that because for all my kids, I want them to have a principal center. They don't have to be, world-class athletes for me. I want them to live principle-centered lives. And for me, my kids they've overachieved in our eyes. And the reason they have is because they're good, humble people. And they commit themselves to their relationships, to their art forms. One of my three is, raising a family. And I think a part of it has to do with the fact that my wife and I are basically in environments where for the first time in these kids' lives that we're coaching or teaching is that's not good enough. There's another level. No, that's not good enough either. There's another level. So it's what you referred to earlier. I want everyone I come in contact with to live on a never-ending ascension. And I think a part of that is for us in the most positive way to let them know there's another level in them and they have to find it.
Anson, I have a final question. It's somewhat of an anticlimax given your tremendous and very open and very human answer to the last question, but I think I'm going to go ahead with it anyway. And I'd like to, before I ask the question, I'd like to start it with a quote. And you say, I know that these extraordinary women are going to have an impact and it's going to be extraordinarily positive. So for me, my adventure isn't just a football one, it's a human one. In fact, you alluded to this very, very point earlier in the interview. But I'd like to ask Anson, in the distant future, when you do retire, what is it? If you'd retire, I don't think great coaches ever do, by the way, but what's the legacy that you'd like to leave behind you as a coach?
I think one reason I watch all those political shows is because I'm an eternal optimist. And I think, and I'm quoting someone else, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but I'll get it close to what I'm trying to say. The arc of human history, I think, bends towards justice. The arc of human history, I think, bends in the right direction. And I guess I want to be a part of that bending in the right direction. I want the people that I've trained to have principle centers, to be positive forces in their own community. I would like my own children to similarly maintain their principle centers and have positive impacts in their communities as well. And the other thing that I would love to see is what is starting to happen now in the most positive way. I think what we're starting to see is women are ending up in more and more leadership positions that are making all the difference in the world. And I genuinely feel that a part of that difference is because of their opportunities to lead in the right way. During this horrendous pandemic, I was cheering on all of the great leaders in the world, and some of the greatest, in my opinion, were the women that were leading. And what was really interesting about something I learned about women a long time ago, when I was a young coach, I didn't know anything about women. And fortunately for me, I thought, was back in the early 70s when I was a student at UNC, the radical feminist literature was telling us that men and women are exactly the same. And I was thinking, thank goodness for that, because I don't know anything about women. And they had given me a women's team. And so I guess knowing that men and women were the same, it was perfect, because I was going to treat my men and women exactly the same. And I'm here to testify that was an absolute disaster. But what was good about the first women's teams I coached is they were telling me they wanted to be treated differently. And I was given a book by Carol Gilligan, and the title of that book was In a Different Voice. And what I really appreciated about Carol Gilligan's voice is she was attacking Kohlberg's theory of moral development. And the reason she was attacking Kohlberg's theory of moral development is Kohlberg had women dying on the third level and men ascending through the top level, which, and I could get this wrong, but I'm guessing this is just from memory, that there were 6 levels and men went to the 6th level, the highest level. And this highest level had to do with making decisions based on ethical principles or things that, I probably studied as an undergraduate in my philosophy courses or something. And Kohlberg said that women died on the 3rd level. And what was the 3rd level? The 3rd level was women were going to make their moral judgments based on how people were affected. And I love that. I would rather live in a country that is led by a woman who cares on how I am affected. Because if you look at the Angela Merkels and what's the name of the New Zealand leader?
Jacinda Ardern.
The previous one.
Jacinda Ardern, yeah. Oh, Helen Clark.
Yeah. These women through the pandemic, if you look at the countries that navigated the pandemic the best, they're all led by women. Why? Because their moral center and their decision-making is based on how people are affected. I would rather be led by someone like that. So I want to be that sort of leader, and I want to develop other female leaders like that. And hopefully, if I have the chance in this class I'm teaching, the men in the room as well, to make their decisions based on affecting people in the most positive way. So I guess that's the legacy I'd like to leave is let's make this world a better place. And let's make it a better place by having our leaders care about all of us.
I can't think of a better place to finish as the father of 2 daughters. So thank you so much for your time today, Anson. It's a complete masterclass. I really appreciate you being so open and honest and taking the time with me today.
My pleasure. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, as I knew I would. And I am a huge fan of that whole population down under. So I think you've selected the right place to live.
Thank you, Anson. I appreciate it. And all the best with the season ahead. Hi, everyone. You have been listening to the great coach, Anson Dorrance. I hope you got a lot out of Anson's deep and reflective style and found a few things that you can bring to your own boardroom table, dinner table, or locker room for discussion. Some of the other things that Anson had to say that connected with me were how he considers himself an expert in competition and how the competitive environment within his team brings out the very best in his athletes. How he discovered soccer while living in Ethiopia, his theory of seed and soil, and how both are necessary to unlock potential, and how a central tenet of his coaching philosophy is human development, not soccer development, and how he brings this to life through peer evaluation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Ryan L., who said, a great way to spend 45 minutes, so much wisdom in a short space of time. Thanks, Ryan. The interaction with the people around the world who listen gives us great energy. And so if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. And if they're positive ones, then please let your friends know too. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.